Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, folks. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, I have an extraordinary story to share with you. Joining me is Scott Wilson, a passionate photo advocate from Denver, Colorado. Scott's journey is inspiring, from his beginnings as a landscape photographer in the UK to his battle with stage 4 colon cancer and his transformation into a wildlife photographer and advocate for both cancer awareness and wild horse conservation. Scott opens up about how photography became his lifeline during his fight against cancer and how he used his art to raise awareness and funds for causes close to his heart. We dive into his experiences with the photography community, his stunning work with wild horses, and the power of photo advocacy. Get ready to be moved and motivated by Scott's incredible story. Welcome to the podcast, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Frederick. I'm delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while, so it's great just to sit back and talk photography, which we all love.
I love it. It's what I do literally for a living, and I love it. I can't think of doing anything different than talking about photography. Who gets to talk about photography and do this stuff? Like you, for example, you're a photo advocate. I want to dive into that first and get into sort of your origin story. What is the Scott Wilson origin story, and how does that kind of lead into the photo advocacy efforts?
Sure, and I think it's a slightly convoluted story, so I need to take you through the chapters. So I'll almost start with the end. I'll start at the end, which is photo advocacy, which for me, at its simplest, is expressing ourselves photographically in a way that benefits causes that we believe in. And I've gone through a bit of a journey on that. But I mean, I started life as a landscape photographer, and I think my primary motivation was art and enjoyment and therapy and just getting out there and enjoying landscape. And this was back in the UK. And I think it's when you experience some of life's challenges that you realize that, that there might be a bigger, better outlet for your art. And as a landscape photographer in the UK, to me, I almost judged success in those days by awards or competitions and that kind of thing. And I thought I was doing well because I'd been in the Landscape Photographer of the Year at contest final 4 years in a row. So I was having a good run and felt quite good about that. And then I got invited to move to Colorado as part of a parallel career, if you like, in the beer business. And even as a Scotsman, with the glory of the Scottish landscape as part of my traditional backdrop, the lure of Colorado was really, really exciting. It's just an amazing destination for a landscape photographer. So I kind of moved with this passion to really get out there and experience the outdoors in Colorado. And we literally visited every corner of Colorado. Colorado's massive, but to cover it all pretty much in the space of a year. And that culminated, again, with the successes I saw. I've been invited to join a gallery in Denver. It was John Fielder's photographic art gallery. And he was the big name in landscape photography. So that was an absolute thrill to join that gallery. I was named Denver's Instagrammer of the Year after a year in Denver as well. So everything was going well, and we really thought we were in the right place at the right time. And then suddenly everything came to a halt, Frederick, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And you can imagine at that point, life kind of just stops. Yeah. But after visiting my oncologist, my quarterback, if you like, Dr. Cohen, who was absolutely wonderful, but he gave me this little warning at the end. He says, we're going to put you on treatment. We've got a plan, hopefully get you to a place that we can have surgery. But I want you to take this drug. It's called panitumumab. It took me years to be able to pronounce that without, it's quite a complicated word. He said, but the side issue with this is it's completely photosensitive. So you have to almost avoid sunlight completely. Now, I've got a Scottish complexion at the best of times, but add the intensity of a Colorado sunscape. I mean, they've got 300 days of sun here. It's absolutely intense. Yeah. And suddenly it was like, well, what happens to my photography? I'm a landscape photographer. I have to get out there. And that's when it occurred to me there was all this amazing wildlife in state parks on my doorstep. And not more than that, you could actually drive through them. So I actually started to drive through state parks and photograph wildlife from the protective shade of my car. So I would almost be going to chemotherapy, then come back and start to photograph wildlife, as I say, safely in the shade. And this opened up a whole new genre in photography, which was just an amazing distraction for me at an incredibly difficult time in my life, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And started to build, you've got to change your kit. Suddenly the 14 to 24 mil lens that was welded to the front of my camera, it shifted towards a 400 and then a 600 mil lens as I kind of grew into the genre and started to build a portfolio that certainly wasn't the same magnitude as the landscape portfolio, but was starting to get some images that I was pleased with. And things were going okay on the chemotherapy front. I started to get a couple of positive screens. So I started to think about, well, how can I use this photography for good? And this, I think, became the birth of my version of photo advocacy. And it was like, how do I give back to the community of cancer doctors and nurses that are literally saving my life right now? And I knew that screening is the big challenge, actually getting people screened. So building awareness of cancer screening was the challenge. And this is where the photography community really came together for me. So I'm an advocate of photography clubs. I think they're just a great way to learn about photography, meet like-minded people. And I had joined a camera club in Denver when I moved here. And there was a couple of people that when I was really sick, I'd stayed connected to, I pulled out of the club scene. But as this portfolio grew and I had this almost book-ready set of images, I spoke to a couple of guys at the club. What do you think? I think I could maybe use this as a proposition to sell some books and raise some money for cancer research. And the response just wasn't yes. It was yes, and we're going to help you. And as you know, so many photographers have parallel careers. So suddenly there's a photographer who's a graphic designer by day, and he said, I'm going to design that book for you, and I'm going to give that to you. Then I had a guy, Cliff, who's just an amazing portrait photographer. He says, I think it's a great idea, and I'm going to take the portraits for the book. And a friend, Jeff, who was into marketing, could get merchandising. He says, I'm going to donate my time in that field. So suddenly the photographic community came together, and that was just unbelievably uplifting at a time when you're in a new country with a new disease, and suddenly these friends kind of come together. So that really taught me, I think, the power that we have as photographers to really connect, bring our community together and do some good.
Yep.
So long story short, a year after diagnosis, I was given the amazing news, Frederick, that I was no evidence of disease. Now remember, this started as stage 4 with a 10% chance of being here today. And so to get to that stage within a year was awesome. Now, when I posted the news in Scotland, what you don't realise is that NED in America means no evidence of disease, but in Scotland it means non-educated delinquent. So everyone had a good laugh at my expense, and I basically announced the illness and the recovery in the same day and launched the book. And that was my real foray into photo advocacy. That book, the sales all went towards raising funds for cancer research. And at that point, it was all about giving back, as I say, to that community and trying to do some good. Where the extension of advocacy comes in is recognising the opportunity beyond that. So some of the photos went into funding research, but I understood the legislative need. Like, screening in Colorado, I think the average age was, the age when it was funded was 50. I'd been diagnosed at 48. The growth in cancer was sadly amongst the under 50s that weren't being screened. And this 40 to 58 group was particularly vulnerable. The American Cancer Society was recommending people get screened at 45. So suddenly I channeled all my photography, fundraising and energy into creating a bill that would actually change the law in Colorado and help people get screened from 45. So that to me, again, is the power that starts with the photograph, but then actually turns into political change if you actually get things right. So that to me is an example of photo advocacy. Now, obviously, I'm on a different track now, and we'll talk about that shortly.
That is an amazing story. And the first thing is congratulations, right? That I can't imagine. I've had several cancer scares in my family, none that have, none personally, but, my sister, my father, my other sister, and it's the diagnosis of stage 4. I have to imagine that is a get your affairs in order conversation that you're having with a physician, and all of the plans and the trips that you'd planned on taking next year, the year after, your bucket list suddenly changes, right? How, from a photographer standpoint, sure, photography was a welcome distraction, and you could kind of funnel into that. But can you talk a little bit about how your mindset towards photography as an art form changed? Did it switch at that moment to the immediacy of it all? Okay, I have to capture these images because the clock is ticking, or was I have to tell the story, or I need a distraction to make myself not focus on this horrible thing that's going on? Can you talk a little bit about that and how that went down?
Yeah, sure. And I think there's just going back to your question and the kind of assumption that there's put your affairs in order, clearly you freeze and you're paralyzed at that point.
Yeah.
But at no point did my oncologist say, your options are over. And I think that was critical. Now, the surgeon said, we're not yet in a position that we can do surgery, and that's a goal. I mean, your chances of survival rise exponentially if you can be have surgery to remove cancer. But as long as my oncologist was saying, we've got a treatment plan, and as long as the screens were improving, I wouldn't say I wasn't terrified and sad, but I had hope. And hope through that is absolutely critical. And I had children, and I had an amazing wife and a family I have an amazing wife that just supported me and loved me dearly. And that is just unbelievable. And with as much as I love photography as a crutch doesn't compare to having that kind of family support and them being there for you, and also you surviving for them. I mean, that's just an unbelievable motivator. And my daughter was only 10, my son was only 14. So the prospect of, leaving them at that early age was something that I was absolutely going to battle as hard as I possibly could against. Absolutely. Now, bring photography in there. Photography at that point ceases to be a pleasure and an art form. For me, it was a necessity. It was actually the thing that provided that essential distraction from everything that was going on. And I don't mean by distraction that I neglected to be aware of what I was going through, but it just allowed me to focus on something else. And I think the point of the advocacy, I think there's a kind of belief that if I'm helping others to identify the possibility of the disease in front of them, I'm somehow helping my recovery process as well. So I suspect there's a selfish psychological motivation at the basis of that, helping myself by helping others. And certainly I did get that kind of strength and determination that as long as I was focused on other people's cancer, I was actually less focused on my own. And I think that was a strong part of my mindset. Yeah. And loads of people have asked me what's the, do you credit your recovery to your spirit and your mindset? And of course, I credit my recovery to my oncologist and the treatment. But I do believe there's kind of 0.5% in there that's about attitude and mindset. And I think when you've only got a 10% chance of living, 0.5% either way makes a huge difference.
It does, yeah. And the power, you mentioned just the power of hope and having hope at the end of that. If you're completely hopeless, then I think, even from just a biological standpoint, if your body knows, or your brain is telling your body that this is all futile and, it's the end of the world, that's a completely different proposition than I even have a glimmer of hope. If there's a glimmer of hope, I'm going to until I can't try anymore, I'm going to move in that direction towards that. There's no hope, then you just kind of shut down, right? It's like, I'll
give you a real story of hope, Frederick, that I haven't actually told a lot of people. But on the day I was diagnosed, my boss, who had recruited me to come over to Colorado, said, listen, I know you just had the absolute worst news of your life, but I've got a friend that I would love it if you wouldn't mind taking a call from him. His name's Jeffrey Trent. and he's the head of the Genomics Research Institute. And at the time I'm thinking, how's that going to help, kind of thing? And said, yes, of course, I'll take the call, and I'm still paralyzed, I'm so scared. And Jeffrey phoned me, and he says, we obviously don't know each other, but he says, I'm in the sort of the front end of cancer research for the future. Genomics Research, obviously is the name. And he said, I just wanted to let you know I have complete faith in the treatment that you're about to go through. He says, the technology that we have today is absolutely first class. It's a transformation versus what you might have grown up with 10 years ago. And he says, I have faith that that's going to work for you. He says, but if it doesn't, you've got a place to come. And he says, what we're going to do is take a sample of your tumour, and we're going to store it at the Genomics Research Institute. And if for some reason your treatment are exhausted, we're going to have something that would allow you to have another chance, have another go, take a risk. And that, I burst out crying. It was just unbelievable injection of hope at an unbelievably difficult time. That, do you know what? Even if the traditional medicine doesn't work here, we've got something that might still save your life. That just gives you so much energy, Frederick. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's like playing a video game and getting an extra life in the game, just in case you die with this one. Then you have another player that can come in and take over. That is
so.
Next time
I tell this story, I'm going to steal that. That's a great example.
Exactly. You got another man to play with, just in case. Yeah, we should always be operating like that, I think, because you never know what's going to happen. Even if you feel like everything is hope, even if it's not, quote, life or death, right? If it's, there's always a way. There's always a way forward as long as you keep pushing. And one of those ways go ahead. Yeah, please continue.
No, I was just going to say, my mother died of colon cancer, and she was 59.
Wow.
And I think that's a testament to how much the treatment has improved. I think if I had gone through the treatment process that was available to her, I wouldn't be here. So in the space of 25 years, and she committed her body to research, so I genuinely believe that somehow, her contribution to research helped me and people like me 25 years later. So that's kind of how I reconcile. Yeah.
That is crazy, because and back then I'm sure it was the treatments that she was getting were state of the art, right? They were doing all the things that could be done, and it ended the way that it ended. Same with you. Fast forward to when you went through this ordeal, state of the art, but you had a different outcome. And just like you and I were thinking, or were discussing before we pressed the record button, the technology of today is making things even more, giving us powers. Like, I want to make this a discussion about forward-looking technologies. We'll do that another time. We'll do that over beers when I come to Colorado in November.
Love it.
Yeah,
Colorado beer culture is fantastic.
Yeah, with my mile-high alcohol tolerance at an all-time low.
You need to come a week early and acclimatize.
I totally, yeah. Or just starve myself of oxygen for a week and then go. We'll see how it goes. I want to switch gears and talk about this next phase that sort of opened up after this, and that's there's still related to photo advocacy, but there are giant animals involved, in this next phase. Set it up for us. Like, how did you segue into this, into horses?
So by this point in my career, we're sort of 2017, 2018 at this point, I've now decided that I'm no longer just a landscape photographer. I'm now a landscape wildlife photographer. I had taken a safari trip to Africa. I'm absolutely blown away by the opportunities there. And then I came back and someone said, have you seen the wild horses in northwest Colorado? And I was like, no, I haven't. And so I took the 5-hour journey up to and that's how big the state is, up to northwest Colorado. And there's this area called Sam Wash Basin. It's 160,000 acres. To give you perspective, I think Greater Denver's like 99,000 acres. So it's like 1.5 times the size of that.
Wow.
And at that time, there was something like 300 or 400 wild horses scattered across this terrain. And I went in, and at first, it's just the vastness takes you on. It's desolate, but just amazing landscape opportunities. And then you drive in a couple of miles and you hear this in the background, and before you know it, there's dust rising, and these horses were sort of galloping towards me, and it was just an extraordinary first encounter. And I spent a couple of days there kind of searching around, and it was actually on my way out, Frederick, after, I'd seen some great experiences. Fighting horses is just, from a wildlife photography point of view, it's an absolutely breathtaking thing to watch. And I've often said I've seen as much wild behaviour and dynamism on my doorstep as I saw in Zambia on wildlife trips. It's amazing animal behaviours. But it was on the way out that I saw this absolutely striking pinto stallions, the black white mane, the brown white body, and so it's a rare tricolour pinto. And I had the fortune to see this horse engaging in battle, and got some really great pictures of it. And I was driving home, and I was quite proud of getting the pictures, but it was only when I published them on Facebook, and my Facebook literally blew up, that I realised I had encountered this incredibly famous wild horse. And it was at that point that I realised just how large the kind of community was around wild horses, and the passion within America to kind of promote and protect these amazing beings. There's something like 70,000, wild horses across America, and they've all got their little fan clubs and that kind of thing. So this horse's name was Picasso, and that just launched a whole new passion. And I was just backwards and forwards, racking up the miles in the truck to visit these wild animals. And it just opened up this whole new channel, really, in terms of my art. Now, in terms of advocacy, Frederick, I was still very much focused on the cancer side of things. So the horses at this point, they were almost like an artistic outlet from my advocacy effort, which was focused on cancer.
Right.
But then wind the clock forward. So I spent about 2 years just building the kind of the art side of my wild horse appreciation. And you would go back different seasons, and the spring you've got new foals and the fighting. The summer, the dust is kicking up, and you see all this very, very dramatic imagery. Fall, the landscape changes completely. And winter is just unbelievable. When you see a wild horse running across a snowy landscape, it's just so captivating. And I was happy just to take all this in. And then September 2021, the government announced that they were going to come in with helicopters and take half of these horses away. And essentially the reason is there's a competition, if you like, between horses and livestock for some of this land. And it's public lands, after all. But I think horses in 1971 had 54 million acres of public land to roam across. And over 50 years, that's been cut in half. They've got something like 27 million acres now. So arguments like overpopulation start to come in, which I don't subscribe to, but that's the kind of the theory that they need to be thinned out as a population. And I think that's the moment I stopped just being a wild horse photographer and became an advocate. When you actually see these animals that you've gotten to know, and have a strong affection for, being chased by helicopters, and the eyes are popping, and it's just really a terrifying experience. There are injuries when they're running, and they're crammed into these pens. I mean, as a nation, we've now got 62,000 horses in holding at taxpayers' expense. And if you think there's only 72,000 in the wild, they're rounding up 20,000 this year. So you can do the math. We're actually right on the verge of having more wild horses in holding at our expense than in the wild, where they eat and run for free. So whether you're looking through a taxpayer's lens or an animal welfare lens, there's really no good argument for me for
so all these horses in holding, what's the plan? I mean, tell me it's not a euthanasia thing, right? So what's the ultimate goal for these horses?
That's the ultimate dark threat at the moment. That would not be possible from a legal point of view. So, but every year that law needs to be updated in order to prevent that being the outcome. If you go back to the 70s, the theory was if the government takes a horse off, it will be adopted by someone in the American public. Mm-hmm. But the reality is they've only managed to see half of the removed population adopted over the last 20 years. So you've got a situation where I think 50,000 horses have been removed in the last 3 years, and there simply isn't the market, if you want to call it that, to adopt those horses. Yeah. So the system's broken, and there is a far more ethical, humane, and affordable solution, which is called fertility control. And it's a very normal way of managing birth rates down. It's used in something like 58 different wildlife species, including elephants and giraffes in Africa. And the government's been given something like, or given the Bureau of Land Management, something like $22 million over the past 3 years to really implement a huge scale fertility control program, which would just stabilize the birth rate. But they've only spent about 10% of that on fertility control. Meantime, they're spending 150 million on roundups and holdings. So again, whether you look at it through an ethical lens or an economic lens, it really doesn't stack up. And I think this has become the kind of driving energy of the advocate in me. And now the photography goes towards supporting that effort. And I do a lot of fundraising for sort of charities within that sphere. I joined the board of American Wild Horse Conservation, which is the biggest wild horse conservation group in the United States. And I now work for them directly in terms of developing awareness of the issue and trying to bring that to life. And I act as their spokesperson in Colorado. And there's a number of real issues right now that actually could see helicopters coming back in September. So we're advocating for just keeping the horses in the wild, treating the fertility control, manage it humanely. You still get your numbers down, but not in a way that's harming the horses. So there's definitely options here that aren't being executed. And back to your original question, the photography now is going towards raising awareness of that and raising funds where possible to try and drive that energy.
Yeah. Isn't that great, though, the idea of using the power of photography to raise awareness, to that's what photography is for, especially on the photojournalism side of it, right? It is to shine a light on things that I'm going to use the word oblivious in a positive way, but people that are oblivious to what's going on in a particular area or with a particular group, whether it be animals or humans or whatever, to shine a light on that using the power of photography, therefore hopefully making the world a better place, right? Yeah. So, in your journey in this advocacy, speaking from the perspective of, I'm channeling photographers that are listening to this and they're like, oh, I have a camera. I care about things. I want to, be an advocate for this particular thing. How do they engage? Do they just go and start? What do they do?
It's a brilliant question. And I have talked to people about this in the past, and clearly I'm kind of in it 100%.
Yeah.
But I don't think everybody has to be in it 100%. You work out where in your life advocacy fits and then deliver that. And if I go back 10, 15 years, my form of advocacy was rewarding the communities that were looking after my kids. So, for example, I would go and photograph my son playing rugby, and then I would give a photograph to every rugby player at the end of the season. That's a form of advocacy. These kids' eyes lit up. Their parents were delighted. They felt like professionals because they'd been caught in that way. And then I took that on. So my son's track team in Denver, Colorado, again, they all got a professional black and white image of themselves in action on track day at the end of the season. And that's not driving political change, but it's making the community that you believe in feel better about itself and actually driving performance there. So that was maybe when I was an advocate at 20%. And then so you just work out how far along that spectrum you want to be, and then work out the role photography can bring to it. So we don't all have to be changing the world, but when you do, it's so rewarding. You talked about photojournalism. I'm now part of We Animals Media, which it's 100 photojournalists around the world as part of a collective called We Animals Media, and they would basically describe themselves as the founders of animal photojournalism. So to have been, taken my wild horse photography and then been accepted as part of that group, that really felt like a breakthrough for me. And I do talk sometimes, Frederick, and there's a bit of context here. I think viewers maybe don't know, but I was lucky enough to win the Sony World Photography Awards a couple of years ago.
I did know that, yes.
The shot of a wild horse. So that became clearly a talking point when I was talking to school children, photography clubs and that kind of thing. And this young lady actually said to me, she says, has winning that award released you in some way? And it was an unbelievably brilliant question. It was astute. And they say out of the mouths of babes. This was a young person asking me this question, and she absolutely nailed it. So I think that got out of my system the need to achieve and win awards and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a healthy pursuit, but I had it. And it released me to actually be a true advocate, where I needed the photography to deliver on a cause or a meaning that was in me and still had to be delivered on, if that makes sense. So in many ways, she was right. It was a gateway to a different type of photography that actually created more meaning than the award, albeit I'm incredibly grateful for winning that award. Please don't misread that. It was an amazing game changer for me. So.
And that piece was anger management, right? That was
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even then, that was about advocacy. That was about saying, there's a situation where you've got the beauty of the horse and the plight of the horse. Yeah. And the intention was that anger management picture would capture both of those as in essence in one image. But it allowed me to then create a platform for talking about the issue in 170 countries. I mean, the awards had such a reach. So the press release basically, it contained a quote around the plight facing wild horses in the United States, and just opened up a whole new platform for awareness.
I wonder, of course, photo advocacy or advocacy in general is not going to be for everyone, right? But for the people that it is for, I wonder, like in sitting where I sit and speaking to photographers and, just sort of marinating in the market of photography, both from an amateur perspective and professional and corporate and all the things. One of the patterns that I see is just the what should I shoot issue. Like, hey, I'm watching YouTube videos. I know how to do this and that. I'm excited about doing long exposures or photojournalism or aerials or drones or whatever. And people get excited about the hobby and the profession of photography. But what I've seen a lot is the lack of direction and what to shoot. A lot of people don't know what to shoot, so they end up shooting what the people they admire shoot. So say it's a Joe McNally. So now I want to be a commercial photojournalist type person, or a Andy Leibovitz. Okay, I want to go shoot rock stars jumping off of beds in their pajamas and that kind of stuff, but never the advocacy stuff. So I wonder, is advocacy, however you want to wrap it, is it a way for those photographers to channel that what should I shoot question into something that they're passionate about? Like, instead of going to take another picture of a bee pollinating a flower, maybe it's something more impactful that speaks to a deeper level in that artist's soul. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think you've nailed it there, Frederick. And the encouragement I would give to people is to find the thing you believe in. It could be that sort of matches your values. And most of these organizations or issues will have a charity attached, and every charity needs funds. And so every charity has fundraising events, and photography is one of the very, very best tools that you can have at a fundraising event. And it's so simple for us to find that artistic bent, channel it towards a charity we believe in, and donate your images. Yeah. And if you donate those images, so you're going to get a little bit of recognition, which is nice for supporting the cause. Someone's going to get a piece of art that they really love, and the charity's going to get the finance. Now, it's such a simple model, and that to me is my kind of art and advocacy model, is how can we use art to raise funds for the causes I believe in. So I support a rescue, a wild horse rescue near Denver called For the Love of Aria, and there's a direct link to that first roundup I attended in 2021, where one of the 3-day-old foals that was removed now lives at this sanctuary. So we've continued the storytelling of that, but now every image that I shoot at that sanctuary and sell, the money goes directly back to the sanctuary. So the images that I shoot in the wild, they will continue to build revenue and income that allows me to continue to do this. but everything that's shot at the sanctuary goes back to the sanctuary. So that's the model that I've found that really, really works. Yeah. And then donating time, if you like, to organizations to actually bring that to life as well. It's not always about the photography. Once you get wrapped in a cause, you find that some of your time is in front of the camera. I now do media interviews about the issue where it's nothing to do with my photography. I'm just there as a spokesperson for the issue. So that's the questions you were asking, Frederick, about how deep into this do you go? Do you know what? I want to stay behind the camera and just give 50%. Then that would be so appreciated by a charity, and you do that. If you want to expand it, take on new skills, become a spokesperson, then that's an opportunity as well. But
I love that. I love what you're doing. And you know what? It reminds me of my early days in my military career. I was a combat photojournalist in the Air Force for 8 years. And I remember when I was training, going through the sort of the initial training, it was in Denver. And it was in Denver. And they gave us assignments, and my assignment, one of the missions was, they'd give us assignments to do different things like breaking the ice for street portraiture. So here's a 50 mil lens and a roll of 36 exposures. Go out and get 10 good portraits of head and shoulder portraits of people on the streets of Denver, which meant you had to break the ice and do all the things. So long story short, one of my missions was to the Denver Dumb Friends League. I don't know if it's still there, but it was called the Denver Dumb Friends League. Was an animal shelter, and they didn't give me any parameters. Just like go cover this animal shelter. Let's see what you can do. So I went in there and I had did all the conversations and broke the ice and and did the photos. And I'll tell you, I still remember that job to this day because I believe it changed me from the standpoint of, they go round up animals or get, kittens, and they bring them in there and people come in and adopt them and everyone's happy at the end of the day. Not exactly, right? It's more of we get in 100, 5 get adopted, and the rest get put to sleep. Right. And that changed my perspective for animal shelters and adoption of animals and all of that stuff from one day job. Right. It was a one-day job. I went in there at 8 a.m, left in the late afternoon, and that was it. And I still have the images to this day. Having this conversation with you, Scott, the thing that I wish I had done after that was continue. Right, continue and do other jobs around in that particular genre to shine a light on that particular that issue.
As you know, Frederick, photography, one of the beautiful things that photography has no age limit.
No,
and there is no expiry date on your opportunity to go back and continue that.
That
Literally
is right.
No expiry date.
That is right.
Can I tell you one more story about?
Please, I love this.
About someone else. So it's because what I find is when you become a photo advocate, you start to engage with other photo advocates and kind of recognize that what other people are doing for their cause. Do you remember I mentioned at the start Cliff Lawson, who took the pictures of me for my book? He is in his 80s now. He's a veteran gunship pilot who served the United States and Vietnam. He's a distinguished Flying Cross. And he, being in his 80s, sadly has started to go to funerals of people that served with him that he's lost. And he's a really accomplished portrait photographer. He would go into the funeral, and on the coffin there might be an old tatty Polaroid from the 70s that was this was the only way the family had to remember their loved one. So he set about donating his time to photograph Colorado veterans. And he has now photographed 180 Colorado veterans and donated all of his time and the images. So he's not making a penny from this. So there was National Creative Veterans Art Festival was just last month. So we had the privilege of hosting Cliff in the gallery with 70 of his images of veterans. We had an absolutely extraordinary night, and some of the veterans came along. We had an old colonel from, he was in his 90s, I think, that just came along with his family. The grandson spoke. That to me was the power of photo advocacy. When you come to Denver, you'll meet Cliff. He will be part of your audience. So please remember this story. Just a wonderful example of someone else doing this and just doing it to such an amazing degree. So there's definitely a community that can be built here if we just all find the cause that really, really makes us beat. So.
Yeah, I love it. My cause is going to be cats. I love cats. So.
Good. Cats need help.
Kittens, you can't take a bad picture of a cat. I'm just saying, this is a fantastic conversation. Thank you for sharing all this with you. And I have a feeling, something tells me that this is not the end of the story. That there are other projects that you have on the burner, and there are other things that you wanna do. What can you give us a glimpse into kind of what the next project Scott may be targeting? I know obviously you're going to continue doing what you're doing, but are any other areas that you're diving into?
Yeah, there's certainly a couple of avenues. And I think the more I get into the wild horse issue, the more interested I'm in the power of photojournalism to really unlock a kind of better future there. So although I absolutely love going to see the wild horses to shoot them for artistic purposes, actually having a more committed coverage of the roundups and the challenges they're facing there, that's certainly something I want to continue to develop from the exposure side. In the gallery, we're also trying to build that almost as a conservation gallery, rather.
Yeah.
Tripped up in my words there. And we've had a number of wild horse conservation events, but that's then started to spread the word. And there were some wolf conservation questions in Colorado, so they held an awareness event in the gallery. Same with coyotes, etc. So there's been a number of events that we've had at the gallery that kind of speak to it as a conservation space. So I think, again, broadening out just from art to a place where people have conversations about the things that they believe in. I think that's what we really want to try and build as a gallery. So at the end of the day, though, there's still art on the wall, and you were talking about sort of focusing down. I remember when I opened the gallery, it was maybe 50% landscape and 50% wildlife, and within that 10% wild horses. And I'd say it's now 95% wild horses, because you always have to follow where the interest lies. But what I'm very conscious to do is not just put art on the wall that is for sales purposes. There are features there that are display only. It's that photojournalistic side where you're actually bringing some awareness to the plight. So it's no longer just a sales wall, it's also very much an awareness wall. And I think that's an important part of the development.
I love that. What? So there's talk a little bit about the gallery itself. What kind of experience have you built there? Have you curated, and where is it in Denver? If people want to go, they're listening to this now, walking around the streets of Denver. They want to go pop by. Where should they go? Yeah.
So if you're in Denver, we're in the historic art district, which is on Santa Fe Drive, and I was lucky enough to be asked to become president of that district just a few months ago. So that's part of my portfolio now, is looking after multiple galleries that aren't just photo galleries, paint galleries, ceramics, sculpture, all sorts of different galleries in the district. And it's a fantastic, thriving little place. Nothing beats the atmosphere of a first Friday of every month, where the galleries stay open late in the evening, and people, they'll have a little margarita in the Mexican restaurant and then go and enjoy touring around the district. It's an amazing experience. And not to this day, still one of the biggest buzzes I get is people coming in to the gallery. Whether they buy something or not isn't the point. It's when they appreciate the art that's on the wall and they want to have a conversation. And I think I get the biggest buzz from photography students that come in. They don't have money to buy framed pictures. That's not why they're there. They're there to just appreciate the culture around photography and ask you questions. What motivated you behind that image? And I love having that kind of dialogue with up-and-coming students. I think it's why I spend so much time talking to schools and photography clubs around photography. So that's a real kind of buzz. I think we've found a little bit of a niche. My partner at the gallery is a guy called Tony Eitzel, and I describe him as a master framer. He's an amazing photographer, but he's also this world-class framer. And he has a technique called the deckled edge, which some of your guys will be familiar with. It's effectively a torn edge, but it really gives a very distinctive look to the paper. We use watercolor paper called cotton rag. So it gives this sumptuous, beautiful feel to images, and they're just beautifully framed. And I used to react badly when people said, "Oh, your photo looks like a painting," and now I appreciate that compliment for what it is. That, if someone's willing to put your image above a fireplace, then that's just the best feeling in the world, and it cannot compare. It really is, and it doesn't compare to digital appreciation, if you like. And I know that's how most of us see art these days, but if you can get yourselves into a gallery, take part, and just experience the highs and lows. If something's not selling, why is it not selling? That you just ask yourself those questions. And just the joy of presenting different images, keeping them converted, having openings. The best nights we have are when we have guests in with different shows. And so I think I've gone from being purely about my art in the wall to appreciating the opportunity to have guests like Cliff with his veteran show in there and kind of share the love a little bit more broadly. So
I love that. The dream, I think a lot of photographers, not all, but a lot of photographers have that dream of one day I'm going to reach the point in my career where I can warrant or have a body of work that I feel could grace the walls of a gallery, and they strive for that. I wonder if you couldn't speak to that a little bit before we close this off for the photographers that are. And I'll give both sides of the argument. One side of the argument is, hey, we have all these online resources. We have Flickr, we have Instagram, we have on and on. There's no shortage of places online where we can put our images and have them displayed for the entire planet and beyond to look at. And then on the other side of it, we have these bespoke sort of gallery experiences where you put on a nice shirt, you go in there, you get a glass of wine, there's low jazz music playing, and your work is giant on the wall, lit properly, and all the things, right? Where do they coexist? Should they overlap? Is one a pathway to the other? Like, is the online world a pathway to sort of building up an audience that would warrant opening a gallery show? What are the mechanics of that industry these days? What do you think?
There's a lot of questions built into that.
By design, my friend.
but I would call out the difference between popular appreciation, critical appreciation, and ultimately the consumer's willingness to put their hand in their pocket and hand over $1 for your picture. So no matter if you've got 100,000 likes on an image on Flickr, no one has bought that image. Right. No one has put their hand in their pocket and said, I really want that image on my wall. And to me, that's almost the acid test, is when someone says, I appreciate your art so much, I would like it to be my home and part of my life. So I think that's a big difference. And that's not me denigrating Flickr or Facebook or Instagram. They're hugely important in terms of building up a profile and a reputation, and definitely see value in that. But one thing I have learned as well is the difference. I talked about critical appeal and popular appeal. And what appeals to a club judge isn't necessarily what appeals to the consumer that comes into your gallery. And that's a change that I've gone through in the last few years. I used to be incredibly self-critical because I was looking through the eyes of a club judge. And I was actually avoiding placing images on the wall that would have huge popular appeal because I thought they didn't meet a judge's kind of exacting criteria and standards. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't mean little things like the horizons off or, things are blown out. Just things that a judge would have marked you down for. The consumer is not necessarily marking you down for that at all. They're looking to appreciate the image that you've produced in a holistic sense. And so there's a difference between when you're hanging on a wall in a gallery, you are looking through the consumer's eyes, the public's eyes, in terms of what they appreciate. And it can be different. And again, I still appreciate competition standards. I still enter competitions. I still judge competitions. I understand why you need to have standards of quality. But I'm just saying that there are different lenses that we look through in those things. And the gallery has a more open, I think, appreciation to what we might call quality in terms of what people will buy. They're buying it because they love that horse.
Yeah. That's a whole nother story. I think, or discussion that you and I need to have. I think just about the motivations that photographers have for their photography. Are you motivated because you need the adoration of having 100,000 likes on your image, and if you have a bunch of likes on it, you can rest easy, you've done your job and on to the next image? Is it photo advocacy? I'm shooting this because I'm communicating this issue to a greater swath of the population, hopefully affecting some sort of change? Or is it money? I'm shooting because I'm going to hang this and people are going to buy it and I'm going to go buy my new Porsche, right? Or is it a mixture of all those things together, which is probably, in varying degrees, which is probably the answer. Some people, a couple of likes wouldn't hurt to feed my ego, but a big check is much more weighty than a couple of likes. So that legitimacy that brings, someone actually pulling out their credit card or their checkbook, is more valuable, I would argue, than 10,000 likes. $100.
I agree, and I think my equation, and you're helping me kind of refine it, to be honest, Frederick. But
sure,
is like, have I made enough in order to do the advocacy I want to do? So I can't afford to, like anyone, I can't afford to give everything away. Simply can't. I've got 2 kids going through college. So have I made enough from my photography to then allow me to support the charities that I want to support? Because that's where the advocacy comes in. So it's not about exceeding that. It's about just making enough to then give the rest to charity. And I think that's the kind of model that I developed for myself. So that's where I reconcile the income versus the donation side of things, and making a difference for the cause. I mean, the photojournalistic side doesn't make money for anybody. That's not raising money for charity or raising revenue. That's simply raising awareness. So there's almost a triangulation for me there. And often the biggest impact has that image got on the front page of a newspaper and made a difference to the cause. So there's some non-economical factors there to consider.
Yeah. It's interesting. The whole thing is interesting. Just the world of photography and art in general, and how it sort of ebbs and flows, and all the changes that happen, and the opportunity and the technologies that show up to allow us to do different things. And it keeps me interested because it's always changing. I hope we get a chance while I'm in Denver. I hope I get a chance to visit your gallery, because I would love to go in there and just sort of absorb the reality of it all. Yeah,
we can do take 2 in the gallery if you like. Apparently the acoustics are okay, so we can work.
You got it. We will make it work. I'm going to hold you to that. All right. So we know where the gallery is. If people want to find you online in the digital ether, where would you suggest they point their browsers to?
Yeah. So if you want a website, www.photoadvocacy.org is the website I go under. If you're searching on Instagram, it's photoadvocacy_Wilson Axpe. That's my name and my wife's name together, so it's Wilson AXPE. And on Facebook, it's Wilson Axpe Photo Advocacy. So either, if you search photo advocacy, it will come up in the right places. But Wilson Axpe is the kind of identifier of my family names. So.
Perfect. All right, and I'll link to all those in the episode blog post and in the email and all that stuff. Thank you, Scott, for taking the time.
My pleasure, Frederick. Really enjoyed it.
This is one of those interviews. Every now and then, I enjoy every single interview I do, and I learn something new from everyone. But every now and then, there's one that flicks a light on in a room in my brain that I hadn't been in a while, right? And
That's fantastic.
Of course. Yeah, you just sort of wake something up that's been dormant for a while. This is one of those interviews. Hopefully it's been the same way for people that are listening to this, because it's your journey, both with the beating the stage 4 cancer and how that went about, and the just the hope that your friend in genomics gave you, and the helping these giant animals, you know, kind of make their way and tell the story that they're having. And it's the whole thing, all of it is inspiring. So thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing and letting us benefit as an audience from your trials and tribulations and the direction that you've chosen to point your life in, which is helping all of us. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Frederick. I've enjoyed this thoroughly. I think you've got a great product here, and I really appreciate your questions.
My pleasure. And I will see you in November, sir. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Get the beers chilled.